Have you ever thought about buying a house and then you were like, dang, that's gonna be expensive. And there's gonna be all these unknown costs. And if I have a problem, I ain't gonna be able to call my landlord and blah, blah, blah. Look, I am all for getting into a home, you know, investing in real estate and all these things. But I really do think that people should think about the unexpected costs of home ownership, because people don't think about these things, okay? And as someone who has owned multiple homes, who's invested in multiple homes, I will definitely lay out for you some of the costs that randomly come up that you need to have money for. So if you're like me and you don't necessarily believe in an emergency fund, or you're not a great saver, or you never really had a reason to save, I'm gonna give you a reason today to save, okay? So some of the unexpected costs, let's just talk about some of the expected costs, okay, right? So you go into the season of buying a home, you have your down payment, right? So that could be anywhere from 0 to 20% down, right? If it's your primary residence. 0% down if you're using a program or a grant. It can be 3.5% down if you're doing an FHA loan. It could be 5% down if you're doing a special loan. It could be 20% down if you're doing a conventional loan, right? 10% if you're doing a second home, et cetera, right? So you have your down payment costs. Then you have your closing costs. So these are the costs to do your loan and to sell the property to you. So title, escrow, in some states, attorney's fees, the cost of working with your lender. So typically lenders will charge a certain number of points. Then you have the interest that they're collecting. If you're buying in a condo or there's an HOA, they may collect some of that up front. You got property taxes, etc. So a lot of these things are costs you expect, right? So your down payment, your closing costs. You may have a home inspection cost. That could be anywhere from $250 to $700, even more, depending on how big the property is. You have your appraisal costs. I usually pay like $500 for an appraisal. I recently had an appraiser charge me $715 for an appraisal. This is a 3-bed, 2-bath. And I was like, what has driven the price up so high? And this is in Texas. So I'm like, I don't understand why the price is so high. I think it's because of the lender. I'm not sure. But anyway, for an appraisal, you can expect between $500 and maybe even see $900, depending, like if it's multi-unit. What other costs? You may have the cost of furnishing the home. You have your moving costs. You have, depending on the state you're in, you may have supplemental property taxes. So here in California, they love to tax you, man. Not even just for property, income tax, sales tax, tax. California is full of tax, okay? So when you get a home in California, you will get a bill that is a supplemental property tax bill. Now, this is separate from your regular tax bill, okay? You're gonna get reassessed on the value of your property on your regular bill too, but you also gonna get a supplemental property tax bill. Now, I don't know why this happens, but when you do your loan or make your purchase, you will get some disclosures. And there's usually a notice about the supplemental property tax, what it is, and you know how it works. So definitely read that. So that's another expense. And these are all the ones that you expect, right? And then what else? There may be expenses in terms of changing your address and things like that. Now, after spending all this money, you're probably like, okay, like these are things I plan for. Everything's good. Now I can just chill. The cool thing too is usually if you are buying your home with a mortgage, you usually don't have to make a payment that first month after you move in. So for instance, let's say it is January and you close on your new home. You typically won't have a payment due if you bought with a mortgage until March, right? So it gives you a little buffer, right? And that's basically rolled into your closing costs. So it's not that you never paid it, it's just that you prepaid it in the loan. So that kind of gives you a window, and you might have a little bit of breathing room to start furnishing and getting settled in, unpacking, etc. And so you're like, okay, everything's good, move into your home, and then things start happening, okay? Now, things can start happening ASAP or years later, months later, whatever. But let me tell you some of the random things that come up just as a homeowner in terms of what to pay for. And I'm talking about outside of your utilities and your regular home maintenance stuff. I'm talking about just random things, okay? First thing is random water, okay? Water is a beautiful thing, but it is one of the most destructive forces in terms of a building, right? Water is like not your friend. Water coming through walls, water coming through your roof, water like seeping anywhere is usually not a good thing, right? So you may have unexpected water issues. Now, what does that look like? That can look like if you live in a condo. This is something that happened to me recently. That could look like water coming from the ceiling into your unit through the light fixtures, okay? That's one water thing that could happen. Maybe you have an upstairs neighbor and, you know, maybe something happened with their plumbing, or I don't know. You could have water coming down into your unit, random, unexpected. And you may be dealing with insurance. They may not cover you, all kinds of random things. Another random water thing I had with a different property is my tenant was out at work. The neighbor, this is a townhouse, so two adjacent homes, right? They share a wall. So tenant was out at work. Neighbor was also out at work. And while the neighbor is gone, their pipe bursts. So water everywhere, literally filling up their unit from the bottom up. Now, because they share a wall with my unit, the water is now seeping through the floor and through the wall onto the other side. And now water is filling up my unit, right? So mind you, no one's home, so no one knows that this is happening. My tenant gets home from work and opens the door and water comes pouring out. Imagine. So random things like that can happen. You can have, what else? Oh, I had a situation where the water heater just exploded. I mean, just hot water everywhere. Do not know what happened, but I got a phone call that there's water everywhere. The water heater has burst, and I mean, you just can't make this stuff up, right? So random water issues. You may have a home that I recently moved into. You may have like a skylight. So a skylight is one of those, there's like an opening in the ceiling, and it'll usually be like almost like a window covering it, but it brings the light from the sky literally into this space. But it's not really a window. It's kind of like a concave window of sorts, and the light comes in. But anyway, this was in our bathroom, or is in our bathroom. And we had, one day it was raining and water just started leaking from the skylight. I mean, I guess it wasn't properly sealed. And so, yeah, water was coming down into the bathroom, just dripping. Random water issues. And I'll give you one more water issue. So we have our hot water heater and air conditioning unit in the garage. And I park in the garage, and I was noticing that the floor was wet, you know, when I would get out of my car, and I was like, what's happening? Like, why is the floor wet? And I couldn't find the source of the water. So I called out all these plumbers. By the way, some of these people will make you come out for a service call, even if they're unable to help you. And even if they don't really know what's going on, but you still have to pay for them to come out a lot of times. So I called maybe 4 or 5 plumbers. I think I had to pay for like 3 of them. None of them could tell me what is going on, right? So they're looking at the air conditioning unit. They're like, oh, I think it's coming from here. Can't tell. So, you know, I'm putting on my inspector hat, and I'm seeing on the floor of the garage, this white, fluffy, powdery looking stuff come up. That is salt, okay? That is the salt being drawn out of the concrete by the water that is seeped into it, okay? So now I know wherever this water is coming from, it has gotten under the concrete in the garage, and it is now creating efflorescence, right? So that's salt coming up out of the concrete. And I was like, okay, let me follow the path of the salt so I can see where the water is going. And so that helped me to see kind of where it was coming from. And I saw that it was coming from under where the water heater was. And I was like, very interesting. So I had someone cut open the bottom where the concrete is, and lo and behold, it was full of water down there. So somehow, some way, there was no drainage system from the air conditioning unit to outside of the home, and so the water was just filling up and now going under the house. So anyway, all that to say is random water issues can come up, and just so you know, water issues can be particularly expensive because water can lead to mold. Who knew, right? So when mold gets involved, now you're dealing with restoration companies, you're dealing with loss of use, so you can't usually use the space when it's being treated for mold, and then usually you have to rebuild the space. Like, it's a whole thing. So water issues is definitely one of those big ones that people don't always think about. Another one is random utilities, right? So I said that you expect utilities, but what you don't expect is rate changes on the utilities. Now, these utility companies, let me tell you, they will change up on you from season to season, okay? So what your rate is for electricity in November is not going to be the same rate as your electricity in July, right? So they change the rates based on the season, but they also change the rates based on peak hours, okay? So they charge you more for electricity and water during times where a lot of people are using those utilities. Now, you may be like noticing fluctuations in your bill. You're like, wait, you know, 1 month my electricity bill was $70 and now it's $200. What gives? I haven't changed anything, right? Well, what changed was the season, okay? So this is one of those big things that I think people do not prepare for. You know, they think their costs are going to be relatively stable, but then, you know, there's also things that you can put in place to help maintain a stable usage and charge level. So some of these apps like the Nest will identify times where there's the peak hours and turn off your air conditioner so you save money and things like that. So that's one big unexpected one. Another one is negligent neighbors. Okay, so you know, you get your house and you're not expecting your neighbors to affect your living situation, right? Because you live in a house, but sometimes neighbors can do things that affect you, especially if you live in a condo or a townhome, right? And sometimes it's not even the neighbor, sometimes it's the HOA, right? And that's a whole nother story for another day, but let's just talk about neighbors. So if you live in a condo or a townhome, your neighbor's repairs or lack of repairs can actually impact your property. So let's just imagine a neighbor has a water issue that they don't address, right? Let's say they have water seeping into their walls and now that water's just been sitting there. And so over time, mold starts to grow. Now, let's say you share the space between those walls. The mold is growing and now it's affecting your property, right? And you don't even know, okay? You find out later. Things like that can happen. Or let's say, like what I explained earlier, you know, the water just randomly falls through the ceiling and you're like, what's going on? That could be the result of something your neighbor did or didn't do, right? So you was just minding your own business, but now you are being impacted by something that happened on your neighbor's property, okay? This is especially the case with condos and townhomes, but it can also happen with single family homes, right? Like your neighbor can decide to build a fruit tree, you know, or not build, but plant a fruit tree, and over time that thing can grow. Those roots can start to come under your property, under your home, lift your home, mess up your foundation, all kinds of things. And look, this is not to scare you, okay? I'm just letting you know that there are definitely unexpected costs of home ownership, so things that you should look out for, okay? Another thing is with HOAs. So I'm gonna get a little bit into HOAs, even though I really don't wanna talk about it, but these HOAs, I need to do a whole separate video on HOAs, but sometimes people move into associations, so condo associations, townhome associations, even single family associations, where they have a homeowners association. And what they don't expect is a special assessment, right? So you have your monthly or annual dues for your HOA, but what you may not know is that HOA has repairs that have been neglected for decades that now need to get done. And you moved in at just the right time to be responsible for those repairs. Or what you may not know is another neighbor has sued the HOA, and now, the HOA had to make a big payment and their reserves are depleted. And now they need a special assessment on all the owners to make up for that money. There's all kinds of things that can happen with HOAs that will cause them to affect a special assessment. So that's one of the big ones that people do not expect when they move into their new home. And I didn't go over everything, but there's all kinds of things that can happen. I mean, things break all the time, light bulbs go out and things like that. But these are really just some of the bigger expenses that can happen that we don't expect when we move into a new home. So I think the takeaway here is really about that financial preparedness and doing your due diligence. So there's definitely things you can put in place, like a home warranty, right? That can help you shoulder some of these costs. So if you are buying a home from someone, have them give you a home warranty. If you can, negotiate more than 1 year, because a home warranty will protect things like failed appliances, certain systems in the home that insurance will not cover. Trust me. You can also just ask more questions, right? So if you are buying a property and there's an HOA involved, ask about their reserves, ask about upcoming special assessments, ask about lawsuits that are pending, and ask directly, is the board contemplating a special assessment anytime soon? If so, how much is that? Then you can take that information back, negotiate with the seller to get some of that covered, right? Because why should that fall on you? You just now bought the home, right? You just now coming into this. So really thinking about, how can I better prepare for some of these things? Maybe you're stashing aside a little bit of extra money just in case some of these things come up. Also getting a good insurance policy and really looking at their track record and understanding how their claims process work and what's covered and what's not covered. These are some of the ways that you can protect yourself against some of these unexpected expenses.